I'm not just preaching to the converted because what I have to say is pretty damn nonpartisan these days and more mainstream than I ever imagined it to be. But let me start. On January 17th, 1961, that was 60 years ago yesterday. Um, these words would be prophetic. And let me explain. For almost the past 20 years, all the USA's been doing is unending war all abroad. During the past 20 years, specifically after 9/11, a lot of innocents from the Muslim world died, and died unnecessarily. Yeah, some actual bad people did perish as well. Uh, a lot of Americans died too. The innocents that died with this war on terror outweigh the actual assholes that died. This is why I always accuse George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, in spite of his recent epiphanies, about what he did and was complicit in. John Bolton, who might have been the worst of them all, many others. I accused them all being war criminals, and they were war criminals. They are war criminals are actually walking around free. I'm not partisan because remember Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, Joe Lieberman, John Edwards were all as compliant as U.S. senators voting for the war in Iraq. This is a nonpartisan issue. They're walking around free when they're war criminals too. The war, this war on terror that was done inefficiently and stupid cost trillions of dollars. I mean, you think about the trillions that we spend yearly being abroad. Imagine, imagine what we could have done with all that killing and destruction if that money could have been put on healthcare here in the United States. I mean, and for what? Iraq, it's been proven. There was no link to 9/11. There was no weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein was a son of a bitch, but only to his own people. And even with Saddam Hussein, women were not treated on par with the way his fellow neighbors were treating women. Women were treated with equality on par with the West. Christians were not persecuted in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. Um, I mean, he was an asshole, but he was a secular asshole, and he kind of kept the radical clerics um, in line. But the thing about it is, look how many people died because of a lie George W. Bush, claimed was true. Look at the lie. The half a million people that died due to the sanctions. And some of this shit's Bill Clinton's and George Herbert Walker Bush's fault because of the no-fly zone around. But what George W. Bush did was 100 times worse, combined with the invasion and the occupation and the no-fly zone that was set up as far back as 1991. A half a million people died. Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, claimed it was worth it. We got ghouls from both parties, bloodthirsty ghouls. A lot of Americans died. A lot of British people died. Just you had bad people. You had bad result across the board. And yeah, I know there are actual bad actors out there. That are committing acts of violence against the West. But you don't go solve it by invading the wrong country, or even invading any country for that matter. On January 17, 1961, 60 years ago, soon to be former President Dwight Eisenhower warned us against the detrimental effects of the military industrial complex. You know, the defense contractors, greedy bastards, Pentagon bureaucrats, paper shufflers, starving for funds, and the politicians from both parties getting their piece of the action. But let me also add a complicit media. Yeah, Fox News is the warmongering media, but so was CNN. And even so was MSNBC during those Bush years. Remember, Phil Donahue and Jesse Ventura lost their jobs because of their opposition to the Iraq War. It's the neoconservative Republicans, it's the corporate Democrats, it's the Israeli lobby, it's Saudi Arabia's influence too, it's the Christian right that support a lot of these neoconservative Republicans, and these are all involved with what's happening with regard to our foreign policy in the last 20 years, in some ways longer than that, but with 9/11, this is when this shit started. Now, there is a political alliance of sorts with regard to Eisenhower's words today. Mostly and most loudly tends to be the political left. I'm not talking about the pretend progressives that call themselves Democrats, but I'm talking about real street fighters. Yeah, some of them were involved with the anti-war protests, but as soon as Obama became president, all of a sudden, those anti-war protests disappeared almost overnight. But those on the left that remains committed to the anti-war cause. Also, the libertarians. There's a lot of libertarians that are on the same boat with the legitimate real left that are against these wars. Some paleoconservatives over the years have kind of joined in common cause. I mean, you know, and some of the politicians that have been fighting the good fight against the military-industrial complex and against endless wars include people like former Congressman Dennis Kucinich of Ohio, who ran for president in 2004 and 2008. Ron Paul, Republican from Texas, that ran for president in 2008 and 2012. His son, Rand Paul, the junior senator from Kentucky, he's wrong on pretty much everything except foreign policy and maybe a few domestic civil liberties issues. When he wants to talk about health care and he wants to talk about busting up unions, Rand Paul can just shut the fuck up. But if he wants to talk about the military-industrial complex and the militarization domestically of law enforcement and the shitty aspect of the drug war, I'm all ears and willing in those particular cases to be in common cause with him. Bernie Sanders has spoke over the years against military interventionism abroad. He's not perfect on the issue, but he's still one of the louder voices. Although scoffed at by some progressives, and some progressives like her, and some people on the right like her, would be Tulsi Gabbard. And in spite of her leaving Congress, co-sponsoring the anti-transgender bill, in spite of the fact that she's got otherwise a pretty good record on the LGBTQ civil rights issues in Congress, with the exception of that one, she is still correct when it comes to many aspects of our foreign policy. And even some, not all, but some factions of the people Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020 were impressed by some of his language about being against the military-industrial complex. He didn't use those words, but being against foreign wars and promising to bring the troops home. He didn't. But they were, I'm just saying, you know, to be fair, that was part of his coalition. And you know, a lot of them were disappointed too. But the point I'm trying to make is that Dwight Eisenhower's words were correct all along. And I just hope that in the years to come, that we will get an awakening here in the United States. I don't mean a rude awakening. Unfortunately, we had a rude awakening, and our words were ignored when we warned of what would happen with this invasion of Iraq. And there's some today that wanting to go and invade Iran when Saudi Arabia is the country that's causing the biggest problems in that region. And no, I do not support invading Saudi Arabia either. But I certainly sure as hell think we should cut off diplomatic ties and stop our ties to oil purchasing from them, although we're not doing it as much as we used to. And certainly not sell arms to them so they can go and commit genocide in Yemen. That's all I'm saying. And I just hope that one day people will realize how correct. I mean, where the average person realize how correct Dwight Eisenhower was historically. Now, it's not out of the mainstream to be opposed to the war today. I mean, I remember I was considered a nutty person between 2002 to 2001 and 2005 opposing these wars. But by 2005 onward, it was less support, and it became less partisan. And people are just tired of these damn foreign wars. It's expensive. It a lot of innocents over there died, and a lot of the actual bad people over there committing acts of terrorism against the West, and it pretty much made them more determined. And so I just want people to realize what an ultimate failure the George W. Bush doctrine was, which is appropriate because I am going to do a commentary probably sometime next week comparing the presidency of George W. Bush to the presidency of Donald Trump. This shall be interesting. If you like what you heard, press like and comment. If you were absolutely just outraged, comment anyway. We'll have a conversation. Let's see. Feel free to share the content on this channel. As a First Amendment absolutist, it's my duty to inform you that it's to create your own platform, especially if you're passionate about something, and utilize it because we're the muckrakers of our time. Hit that subscribe button. Please do. And until next time, I am American Social Democracy. Peace. And Bernie Sanders for president in the year 2024.